Been absorbed by... Ooh. I do own both those games too. I haven't played them yet, actually. Those are some really, really tall endeavors. Like, what I mean by... Why did I say tall? They're very... They're quite an investment. Okay. Cool. Are you playing it? Or are you watching someone playing it? How are you doing that? It's been a while since I played a CRPG myself. Ooh, that is a very ideal way of playing it for sure. Can you leave without speaking to mom? No. Okay. Alright. She gives us cash, right? Come on, come on. Let's go. Yes, Dexter, your butthead with 3 T's. We have 15 hours in 3 days. That sounds like a blast, Worm. That sounds like an absolute blast. CRPG is the closest thing you can get to like paper and pen with a friend without having to like do all the setups and like having a DM and stuff. Co-op if you have friends that like play CRPG, it's a blast. I would probably go even like the extra and like try to do like a VO or like inherently roleplay. I find it is a guilty pleasure for me to like want to roleplay a role that I'm not really prone to being when it comes to CRPGs. All right. Yes, yes, yes. Come on. Let's go, buddy. Come on. Move your feet. Oh, we have to go through this. Can we just leave? Dang it. Alright. Fine. Yes, yes, yes. Yep. Have to sign in here. Yep, we're good. Let's go. Starting out was pretty tough and felt very limited. Not sure if that's normal for these. It is. It's kind of like it's a sense of growth, right? It becomes it's a very, very smooth curve. CRPGs are more like not going as fast as you can. It's more about like the long extended growth. You're playing a role that they wrote a lot of parts in to make it feel like it's an organic character, so you can more see it as a truncation of the character's life, right? Some CRPGs go really long, so you're in it for the ride. You kind of start trying to method act and become very attached to your character. It's what MMORPGs try to mimic, but without the predetermined role. Like, you're not escaping yourself and fulfilling a role. In MMORPG, each of the players become those characters, and that's why MMORPGs tend to have a very wider scope in terms of how long the player feels that their character gets incrementally stronger and bigger tools and more complex things being added. So you can think of CRPGs as a much more closed off and refined version of that. there is less player noise to fill the role of these characters. It's like being stuck in someone else's body, which can give you a lot of perspectives, different perspectives. It's the role-playing part of role-playing games. Still a very niche thing. It used to be it used to be the trending, like in the 80s to the 90s. It was a trending genre of gaming. But nowadays, you know, the most popular form of gaming these days is I'm the main character. The player is the main character. The player gets to shape the character wherever they like. If the game feels good, as long as I can play the way I want, that's how it works. And even nowadays, the RPG mechanics of modern games is a relic. It's like a little piece of the RPG element, but it's no longer the same thing that it used to be. Like the whole stats thing with the numbers and stuff, that doesn't represent what RPG used to be anymore. But for the all intents and purposes, the common understanding of what RPG now is those stats. Those are the stats parts that are left over. But you still have games like that are made by Lorien Games, and like the developers of Wasteland. I forgot who the developers of that is. That are keeping the CRPG style alive. Now it's called classic role-playing games, where your stats and stuff go up and down based on your choices and permanent stat loss. Like the stats are thematic. They mean something to them. So like if you're really intelligent, obviously you're not going to get away with you have to sacrifice something for being intelligent. And being intelligent allows you to do certain things. It also takes away and prevents you from doing certain other things. And then being dumb makes you not be able to do certain things. Makes your stats, your choices, and your character you're embodying matter effectively. And then the RPG elements are being added in modern games, like FromSoft games. They're cosmetic. They're a way to soft elevate your character, but it's fully customizable. CRPGs, it's fully customizable, but there's pros and cons to all the stats and stuff. It would be really awesome if a game goes even further. Like you can be too intelligent, you can be too smart. I mean, like too charismatic or too strong for certain things. So then you have to find balance between that. That would be really intricate. I would love to see someone tackle that possibility. Stats were supposed to describe the character. Now it doesn't. Like modern games, the most trendy games, the me as a main character games, the stats no longer mean very much. It's a means to an end. It's a mechanical benefit. So if you need to be smart, just make yourself smarter. In an RPG game, the old school, like actual role-playing games of old, if you choose to be strong, you don't get to choose to be smart sometimes. If the character you play that you were given, or the role you're given, can't be smart, you can't make the character smart. You're trying to be the character. You're not you yourself. The player is not the main character. You are transformed and being in the shoes of the main character. That's what role-playing technically means. You're playing a role given to you. You're not playing yourself, which I miss that. I have a game that's in the docket that I have yet to tackle, Disco Elysium. That would be a role-playing essential for anyone who wants to know what RPG really means, in my opinion. Nowadays, what RPG means are the stats, so I understand that, and that's usually when someone talks to me about RPG games, I assume that's what they're referring to. Can I just leave? Because I want to get these. Alright, cool. Yeah, just give me whatever. Hurry up. A very great example is the vast majority of players usually actually prefer their characters say nothing. Like the protagonist. The protagonist is a vessel for the for you, the player. And when I grew up, the RPG that I fell in love with was I'm stuck making difficult decisions for a character that I can't relate to yet. But the game gets so long and the developers were so great at writing that you start feeling like the character. You start understanding like... And then when you stop the game, right? When the game stops and you get pulled out of the video game, when you get pulled out of the video game, you're like, dude. Then you start reflecting on your own life. Like, you start thinking, man, it sucked. That character's life sucked. Every day is a life and death situation. And then you stand back and you realize you can reflect on your own life. So RPG games take you away and basically throw you in someone else's body. And you're trying very, very hard to be that person for the time you play the game. And when the game goes off, you're just like, huh. At least I don't have to get up and train and make sure that I don't die tomorrow. That kind of thing. I remember an RPG that I use being too much of something, but I don't want to expand. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, role-playing is still role-playing, so it can get anywhere. Role-playing is the ability to embody something that maybe you want to explore, but maybe you keep that to yourself kind of thing. So a lot of role-playing is to try to be something you are not, or explore something you cannot be. And that's what made RPG games so fondly trending in the early 80s and 90s. However, that shifted quite dramatically after late 90s, when it feels better for the kiddos and the people who are buying stuff to be the main character. So without hard statistics, it is very clear what type of games sell better. It's the choice matters to the player games, not choice matters to the roles games. So games, even Telltale games, like when they did The Walking Dead, had a spike, but it fell off now. It's not about watching someone's story or trying to cry in someone's story. It's about if the developers can make you cry as the player who is in the game, as opposed to the player being a observer of someone else's story. So books aren't that popular either, like relatively. When you read a book, you're reading someone else's story. Like, there are books like your choose your own adventure books and stuff that were kind of popular, but then it more or less visual novel games and stuff take place over the choose your own adventure type of thing. Maybe, I don't know if it'll come back or not. Right now, fantasy is on the rise, and fantasy is typically role-playing games. You get to witness heroism, you get to witness people that you don't like, people that you kind of like, people you feel sorry for, you know, like characters that aren't you. And for me, the best part about role-playing games is you get to be one of those characters. And it's kind of fun, even though I suck at it, like role-playing. I'm not the great, like, role-playing requires a bit of acting. And sometimes when you don't practice being a jerk, it's really hard to be a jerk. But it's kind of fun trying, because I like finding out what I'm bad at too. So like, how do I impersonate a strong-headed, righteous person? Well, I would be overacting. I'd be like, righteous, you know, do the right thing or something. I don't know. I would have to think about it. But when you're playing a role-playing game, you get to see all that. So you get to play a character that speaks in that. So you kind of, if you can't empathize yet, you can at least play a role to see what it's like all the consequences, the pros and cons about being a righteous character or being a shady character, what it's like. I think Rockstar Games is still pretty good at that. If I had to think of a modern successful like AAA game like developer that still nails the role-playing aspect of a game, it'd probably be Rockstar. Along with CDPR, but CDPR has had some technical hiccups, right? Because Cyberpunk 2077 had some technical criticisms, but the role-playing aspect of CDPR's writing and whatnot and their source material enables that. Like the character that you play, it's a mixed bag, man. Being Geralt of Rivia is a big mixed bag. Or Squaresoft still holding up the tried and true JRPG stuff, you know? Like, you can't get over like Final Fantasy VII, right? Zack dies, Aerith dies. Like that universe, the Final Fantasy VII universe. And that stuff is what role-playing games are. It's not the stats, like leveling up. That's the surface level. The whole leveling up and customizing your stuff, that's the mechanical part of an RPG. But the soul of the RPG is feeling like you're watching an anime and a movie and be part of it at the same time. Nowadays, the kids that are more interested in being the main character, the sentiments you hear all the time is like, well, if I want a story, I'll just go watch a show or a movie. I want to be part of the game. I want to be the star of the game. So when you're playing a game, it's a video game because you can control it. It's about you. Like, well, I beg to differ, to be honest, because I come from a different time where you can have all the above. You can become that character. What is it like to be smart? Or what is it like to be in the body of someone who's a loser? Or to you as a loser? That kind of thing. And NSFW too, so, you know, what have you. Whatever gets you outside of your body. And it's a great way to experience it. It's a great way to take in more perspectives, I think. In my opinion. If you want a fun way to be like, I don't really understand. It's like, we'll play a role-playing game that features a character like that. You can kinda, at least it's the closest thing you can without having to live it, literally, right? Or Second Life it. GTA role-playing is a great way to Second Life yourself. Basically, you take your life, you create a mirror of it, but then you start making decisions that you didn't make in reality and see where it goes. Or it supplants your reality. Basically, like during COVID, right? We can't be next to each other. We can't be next to our friends. Get into Second Life and have a role-playing game where you are literally next to each other. Heck, make it even more fun. Be two characters that you aren't typically. That kind of thing. Anyways, that's a lot of reminiscing, but those are like the cherish moments of RPGing. And that's what brought MMORPGs to life. Because you're playing another role. You're reinventing yourself if you so wish. However, there's a great distinction between older people and younger people. Older people tend to go out of their way to escape and play different roles in like MMOs and whatnot. Like, just assume a different role, while younger people just play themselves. Like, this is what I imagine my perfect self is in this game. That's fair. It's still role playing. Just not as classical as before. Like for me, I would play someone short, like spontaneous, and foolhardy. Because I don't do that very often. And it would be great to like moonlight as someone that I am not. Get myself out of my element. So I tend, whenever I'm playing a role-playing game, I would play someone who's short, very tiny, unnoticeable, mischievous, and just has an attitude. That's probably generally my classical fantasy role-playing game character. Or the alternative is someone really big, imposing, and absolutely dumb. Like, from that, those are my two, like, if anyone ever asks me to play like an MMO that has customization or like a classic role-playing game, those are my two first archetypes. I play a really big meathead who runs into battle with no concern for consequence, or a tiny, unnoticeable guy who's making trouble for the team all the time. That's probably my two favorite archetypes. Which is not how I handle myself, you know. If I made me as a character, it's neither of those two things. It's probably some dude that has the same stat line across the board, have as many utility traits as possible, and rarely take risks. And probably end up being the narrator of the bard or the person who's record keeping what's happening, but doesn't ever actually participate in any of the events. Just a person who's record keeping. That's probably how I would sum myself up in an RPG game. The last thing I want to do when I'm playing a game is to play something that I already am, in my opinion. Because I don't need to tell myself what I am already. I'm pretty confident that until a game is like super complex, it won't tell me more about myself. But it will tell me more about myself if I'm pretending to be something else. And role-playing games allow you to pretend without getting you into trouble. I don't think I've seen something like what you described. You mean the game? A record keeper role? Well, in typically a bard is, in fantasy games, the bard is the record keeper. So a bard tends to be the one that supports the team, like gives the team buffs, and then they buff and support the team. But the bard is there to be an observer. Their bards tend to not be in the front or largely excel. They're like a utility group. So a lot of times in games, the bard ends up being a little bit OP because they're the ones that supports utility use all the time. So if you play like a game that has a bard in it, it's probably the bard that affects the whole team. The bard character tends to have skills that constantly always aid the entire team, but they aren't ever in the front line, or they don't have any specializations that make them exceptional at any of the things. And then the history of the bard is that they sing songs, they record and witness the heroism of their team, and then they spread the word of their heroism through music, through song. The sci-fi version of that, I don't really know what the sci-fi version of that is. It's probably a librarian of some sort. The librarian role. Like a mechanical librarian. Like maybe a probe or a mechanical like an AI robot. Did you main hunting horn? And I like the hunting horn, yes. The only downside is it took me a while to get to the hunting horn. So but remember, I play games to get in a role that I don't usually play. So my main weapon was obviously something I don't do very often. I'll let you, if you, let's have a fun guess. What do you think are, I played 2 weapons primarily. What are, kind of 3 weapons, but the 2 weapons I play is opposite of me. So what would you think is opposite of what I described? Because Monster Hunter is a role-playing game, and it does force you into the roles through to the personality of the weapons. So I picked the 2 weapons I largely don't... I don't approach life this way. So it's the opposite. I love the hunting horn though. My favorite weapon in Monster Hunter is definitely the hunting horn. But I didn't play the hunting horn. I played 3 weapons that were opposite of my personality, and I was really terrible at them. Oh, Dual Blades is a good example. I think Dual Blades is a good compromise because it has dexterity and mobility. I played something that completely lacked mobility, and it's all about the Unga Bunga. So I joined the family of the Great Sword and the Hammer users and the Long Sword. So anything that was like just Unga Bunga, you just go in and just slap things around. My ideal for those types of games, my ideal archetype would be probably something extremely dexterous. So the dual blade would fit in my wheelhouse. It would be very comfortable because the dual blade has a very high mobility. I would probably characterize myself as a bow user though. In most of those games, after I play the Unga Bunga stuff, I would default back into a range player. It would be a range precision player with positioning only. So I'm not there like making just frame dodging, relying on just frame dodging. I would probably focus on something that just deals with anticipatory positioning. So a bow player, a crossbow player, a magic user, that like a buff character, anything that just requires positioning and being effective in positioning. So none of that just framing stuff all the time. Like in Hades, when I played Hades, my favorite weapon was the bow. I was a bow player. And then the second favorite weapon was the javelin, which you toss the javelin. It gives you the most utility because you can poke at a mid-range distance and you can throw the javelin. So generally, whichever has the most utility. You're a greatsword and switch axe and bow. I think the greatsword is the epitome of Unga Bunga, but hammer, the hammer bros, man. That's the epitome of Unga Bunga. Your first thing you do, you leap off a wall and start spinning into the monster. But longsword is kind of cleanish. I think there's a lot of clean just framing in, like there's an art. It's stylistic and dexterous, the dual blades and the long swords. Unga Bunga I describe as do massive damage. Just keep whacking away. You can stand your ground and still continue to whack away, which technically longsword can. Dual blade is lots of consistent attacks, right? So it's a dexterity class. You rapidly attack, and long sword has some dex and can stay in the but it's singular, and I would agree it's closer to Unga Bunga because it has singular just framing. But Greatsword is like you can dash, you can dash brute everything. So like just you grunt it and you hold your ground. And Switchblade is literally holding your ground, which I like. It's very satisfying. Like not the Switchblade. The Switch Axe is fun because you just hold your ground and you start wailing away. But the bow is by far most satisfying for me. I like dodging more than iframing. I like attacks that pushes me away and like moves me around, and the only reason I don't get hit is because I'm already out of range. And like I love games where the whole point of your nuance is that you constantly know the range of your character's attacks. Like the person attacking you, the thing you're hunting has ranges and effects, and knowing those effects keep you at a safe distance. So, and you're always on the edge. And you can really tell the difference between someone who is just playing keep away, or someone who knows exactly the distance that they need to be. So when they attack and stuff, the attack would move them and shift them the correct distance. Not really far away, just always constantly within the same distance required. And that art form is like one of my favorites. To me, it's an invisible skill. Like it's something that when you talk to a melee dominant person, you're just like, well, they're just keeping away. It's not like the boss can hit them. It's like, well, no, they're keeping away just enough. Like, just enough. It's a difference between running away all the time and making sure you're out of range and just flirting with danger. It's kind of like a martial artist deciding to feint and dodge exactly the right distance instead of running really far back. There's a cool utility for bow and with the wire bug. I don't know. I haven't played Monster Hunter Rise because it's a really long investment. The last Monster Hunter I played was Monster Hunter World. And it's kind of expensive, and also it takes a lot of time. I don't want to shortchange a game like that. But I'd probably go back to Monster Hunter at some point. And then Wild Hearts flopped really, really hard as well. I don't know if you're familiar, but Koei Tecmo collaborated with EA to try to put out a competing Japanese folklore-inspired Monster Hunter game. It's called Wild Hearts, and it got clobbered with technical problems. I was entertaining the idea of playing with Sun and Coffers in Wild Hearts, but the price tag was gigantic and it didn't knock it out of the park. There was a universe where if it knocked it out of the park like crazy, I would still jump in on launch day, but it did not. It actually had the opposite effect. Or leaping around and anticipating. Yeah, it's my favorite thing. So here's why I still play an MMO called PSO2 Online, the Phantasy Star Online 2. They have all those archetypes, but it's a living service game. So like the classes, all their dodging methods and their just framing and their iframes are in different positions of their weapons. So for example, a ranger who just pews, right? Their weapon action, each of the characters' weapon action gives some sort of invulnerability, but the timing is reflective of their theme. So a ranger has to dodge and step into an iframe, not dodge on the iframe. So what I mean is, like from FromSoft, you would dodge roll when a attack hits you, right? Attack hits you, but what a ranger does to take advantage of its reset is if an attack is coming at you, you dodge into the attack. It is at the end of your dodge mechanic because you're anticipating getting hit. So as a ranger, someone who uses the gun to maximize your damage, you have to get used to the mindset that you are dodging anticipatory into an object to get more damage. And it works because when you're at a range, you have to fetch for dangerous plays to get more damage. Your base damage is actually quite low. You're a support character. The ranger is a support character, but you can milk and go to the edge of danger to get a reset. So I love the design of PSO2. I think it's an underrated game because most games are more content forward now. So you can't enjoy a game if it isn't flowing and flooded with content. And live service games tend to be limited in how fast they move content. But I love the weapon array in PSO2, and it's free to play, so I play it regularly on a daily basis. There are 9 weapons, I think. No, wait, sorry. There are 9 classes and 17 weapons or something, and all their dodge windows are different, and it's so rewarding to get to use them back to back. It works more of a Warframe way, so your main character has all those accessibility. It's not like a standard MMO where, like the fantasy MMO, where you have to build another character and equip it and stuff. It's all the same. It's like Warframe where you equip new frames as opposed to having to redo your characters over and over again. Have the same reason not play at the moment. Gameplay seems... Yeah, I was really... I love the artwork. The Wild Hearts artwork. Like, it was clearly inspired off Japanese folklore. I like their depiction of, like, Amaterasu and, like, the wolf spirits and, like, the pig spirit. It was great. Like, I was on board, but then it just got slammed with technical stuff. So, hopefully... I hope that game like makes a turnaround and builds up and whatnot. It looks like a great setting. It sounds like a fun time once they resolve all the technical issues. Also, inside main Koei was working on a Wolong at the same time. Yes. Neo? I like watching it. Neo is not my jam. It's the whole like half-baked RPG added to an want to be an action adventure game. I think there's a little miss in identity. I like watching it. I think people enjoy it. I think Wolong is a more dynamic feel that encapsulates Team Ninja's ability. Like Team Ninja as a dev group, I feel Wolong will be a step towards recognizing what Team Ninja does best. Or does better in their legacy. Neo was like a first take on trying to get the action adventure with an RPG add-on, which was very reflective of what FromSoft does really well. And I think Wolong is a natural progression. Now that Team Ninja sees an infrastructure that's nice, they're bringing back a bunch of the Team Ninja elements, the follow-ups, the double hit just framing in between and combo finishing, instead of the flowing systematic tempo game that FromSoft is known for. You know, the opening hit kind of thing. I think Team Ninja is so their heyday, like back in the day, is about tap tap dodge, tap tap. You know, you're always aggressively in the game, movement forward, like all the attacks keep bringing you closer and closer to the target, that kind of thing. That's what Team Ninja is about. And Neo was like Team Ninja putting the handcuffs on themselves and putting more of a ground game. And that worked. I think it worked for them to experiment with that. But Wolong, when I was watching people play the demo of Wolong, Team Ninja's coming back. I think Team Ninja is knowing what they can now do and add to it, the phonetics of the game. I'm more of a fighter kind of person, so I like scrambling. I don't I've played enough FromSoft games to know that it has its place. I just don't want to wait 14 years for a swing to one-shot me in the face. Just saying. I prefer to, like, you know, dual blade it, you know, like smack it all the way until the last second and dip out and then dip back in, you know. I'm more of a like feint, sway, anticipatory person. So smacking around all the time and then dodging last minute is the name of the game. Or like shooting as much, you know, pumping something up with as many projectile damage as possible and then repositioning, knowing that I have exactly 4 seconds and it takes me 3.5 seconds to perform this maneuver to position out of the range of something. That's kind of my thing. I like phonetics. The constant, you're on offense, now you're on defense, you're on offense, you're on defense. Not phasic combat. Phasic combat is great. It exercises patience, study, persistency, and like all that. But that's FromSoft's game. And Neo, it was closer to that. So I watched people play Neo. Actually, the people I watch still prefers Neo's more phonetic things because the people I watch tend to be fighting game people, the individuals. Yeah. So Neo 2 was watching people play Neo 2, it was Team Ninja was leaning in more, you know what I mean? So like, I'm saying that they're progressively becoming more, they're carving out their identity now. When you said Neo, the first Neo was an experiment. It was an experiment to create the foundations, so like the mechanical foundations to build upon. And I really am optimistic that Wolong, the demo just came out. I don't know if you want to try the demo. If you like a game like that, the demo is for public now. It just came out recently, so you should try it. It's quite great. It feels a lot more like back in the heyday of like Ninja Gaiden games and stuff, but with still the splashing of RPG elements. I personally think that, in my opinion, for those understanding the communities that like these games, I think a purely action adventure game is fair enough. Actually, the RPG elements gives a soft block, you know, like a soft raise and a level customization, but rarely did the RPG element feed into the actual core mechanic. Yeah, I've seen it. I just said, that sounds like you're having fun. You know, these things, if you have too many things to try out, that's great. I haven't tried it out myself. I might play another action adventure game. I'm gonna call them action adventure games because the RPG element is just stats, and I don't particularly consider them as RPG heavy. So they feel to me more like Legends of Zelda. Legend of Zelda is the gold standard of action adventure games. Basically, weapons. If I play Wolong, I'll probably just equip the weapon that I think looks pretty, and the gear that looks pretty, and then just mechanically go through it like an action adventure game, as opposed to a min-maxing game. If I hit a wall, maybe I'll do some RPGing to get through. That's kind of how I approach those types of games. Yeah. Just like mix and match, and one of the elements that RPG stats give you is it gives you the opportunity to give you a lot of weapons, like a lot of types that you may or may not use, and that type of thing creates it adds the immersion to it. Like, it makes the world lived in. So like all these hats, right? All the hats, they're classical hats, but you can choose different hats because the RPG elements allow you to choose different hats, because you can upgrade them and customize them, right? But the hats themselves, like the objects, like the different hats, like, sure, you don't like the hats, right? Yeah, Sun doesn't like RPG elements in general. So That's besides the point. But the RPG elements, the reason why there were stats and looting system in an RPG game, you know, the loot system, is to proliferate the world with stuff. And that stuff makes the world alive. It contributes to the world. Like, this hat looks goofy, but hey, that is a great recreation of a classic Imperial dynastic helmet or infantry. You might not like it, but you know it exists. So the developers use loot systems by introducing like stats and RPG elements to proliferate the world with objects, and those objects give you a sense of feeling like, oh hey, this exists. Like a cup noodle that heals 20 HP, but then you can buy spicy ramen that gives you an attack buff that heals less, that kind of thing. So introducing a stat line is also a way to introduce a loot system, and those loot systems back in the day, RPG games tend to make loot tell stories. Like, there was a time, I don't know if you're getting that into Divinity, but it's fun to read the description of items you get, because the items are part of the world. It has no mechanical benefits. Like, what I mean is, it doesn't functionally have to serve a mechanical purpose. It is there to create the role-playing experience. Like, hey, there's a cup noodle in this game. That means at least it's grounded in something that we have or something. You know, like, hey, there's a floppy disk, and its function is something that gives some stats or something, but hey, it's a floppy disk. That's kind of the idea. And I think Team Ninja and FromSoft adds that to also give them the opportunity to make a lot of items. You know, did it felt really overwhelming? It felt like, yeah, that's how it do be. But that's the idea. It just strikes me as you're not a loot vomit kind of person, which also means you're not an RPG kind of person either. Because like you would be inundated. It should be overwhelming. You're living in a world that is effectively overwhelming. There should be so many things of everything that you shouldn't be considering everything. You should be falling in love with the thing that you fell in love with, and you play it that way. The next time you play it, it's just going to be something else. And the spin cycle is, it's only loot vomit because you undervalue most of the things or what its purpose is. That's generally, it's a perspective shift, but it's very reasonable that you think loot is vomit if you don't value the perspective of what it symbolizes, right? That's kind of the thing. And it's very understandable. So what you describe is you're more of an action adventure game person as opposed to an RPG person. That's why Sun doesn't like Neo loot system. Actually, Sun just doesn't like inherently loot system like that, because he is mechanically focused on what is the functionality of loot, not what is the sentimentality of loot. So if it doesn't function mechanically or pragmatically, it's a waste of time and why it should be in the game. That's kind of his approach. Like, we have to empathize with that. For me, loot in the game is an opportunity to proliferate the game with flavor, with personality. Not if Diablo is swimming in loot, that's what made Diablo Diablo. Like, if you were a classic Diablo fan, not swimming in loot no longer is a Diablo game. It's an action adventure game trying to be like Souls or something that's limited in loot. So you could say it's overwhelming and might be not desirable, but it literally became the identifying characteristic of being in a Diablo-verse game. If you don't have loot vomit now, you no longer feel like you're playing an ARPG. And it's each its own, right? Like, you can't, if you don't like it, unfortunately do not play a Diablo game. It's a defining characteristic of Diablo. Like having a weapon with 6 different mods, and those mods are not what you're looking for. So you have to go around and find 8 different more copies of the mods, and then hope that the mod that you want is the mod that you want. Yeah, yeah. It's a preference. For me, I absolutely love when there's just too much of everything. It's too much of everything to the point where I have to tell myself I can't know everything. I don't know if it's even practical, but it's there and I can always come back. Or like, and if it turns out to be useless, Easter eggs are useless, but I absolutely love them. They're littered in RPG games. Easter eggs are everywhere in RPG games. And just the idea that this game has a scope beyond its game makes it larger than life. So the game doesn't end there. Like in the future, if I see another Easter egg from the previous game that's alluding to another game, that's absolutely amazing. That's far more rewarding than beating a boss. For myself, personally. That means I can carry that knowledge and that feeling with me forever. When you're thinking about mechanics, if you're a mechanical player and you think about a mechanical game, you have to go back to that game. When you stop playing that game, that's where it ends. The game dies there. So, if you ask yourself, do you find yourself constantly replaying the same identical game because there isn't any other game that can reach that? You're a closed system kind of person. It's one of the ways you cope with a closed system because you can't find that system anymore. So if someone says like, oh, I don't know what to do, maybe I'll just go back and play Dark Souls 1. You're a closed system kind of person. For me, I just go and find the next game. And the game that I used to play and love, I can revisit it or I can talk about it. It's relevant. I find the relevance in those games in the current game. That's kind of the difference in perspective. So if you're a fine-tuned mechanics person, mechanics don't tend to translate one-to-one to other games. But knowledge, semantics, and experience translates indefinitely. RPG games are that way. I can still talk fondly about Pokemon games or the context of those Pokemon. I can fondly talk about Final Fantasy VII, even though if there wasn't a remake, I can still talk about it and how it made me feel, the sentiments of it. When you're thinking of a mechanic game, you're thinking, oh yeah, remember that time that I dodged and like clobbered that thing? That's what you do 99% of the time in those games. So having someone be able to empathize with specific moments of a mechanical experience is very rare. But if you tell someone a story and how you feel about that story from an RPG game, if they experience that, you can talk about it anytime. Like, because it's monumental, it's sentimental. So when loot comes and you just saw like, I found a rubber ducky today in Diablo. It's a rubber ducky in Diablo. No, actually, I don't think there's a rubber ducky in Diablo, but still. That's what I live for in RPG games. Or the one thing I talk about all the time from Witcher 3 is when Geralt got drunk and he got like robbed, and then he woke up drunk and he had to take care of like these wild vegetation stuff growing up from the farmer's backyard while you were like inebriated, so you were seeing like double vision and stuff while trying to hack at gigantic like weeds. That to me is the difference between someone who enjoys RPG games and someone who's focused on mechanical stuff. You can be both, obviously. You can go back and forth. I do enjoy a mechanical game. I wouldn't be playing Osu if I didn't enjoy a mechanical game. But the thing that defines Osu for me still is talk about the music. And then the process of learning Osu. Not the process of being good mechanically. It is probably, like, I still like it. It's still somewhere in the top 5 but it's further down. Being good is not number one. Like, getting better is not number one. Getting smarter about it, that's kind of higher. Higher than getting better mechanically. That's a long digression, but I love talking about video games, or how video games affect people's lives, and what do you extract from a video game? Making friendship in video games is awesome. Playing the game together is even more awesome. And back in the day, RPG games, like tabletop RPG games, brought people together. And now they are now too. It's on the resurgence. It's like spiking. D&D and, you know, all the offsprings of D&D, like Pathfinders and stuff. Various versions and adaptations of that stuff is on the uptrend. Who knows? You might find me be able to convince even someone like Sun to play a to play a role-playing game. That would be interesting. I don't think I am that very strong-armed in getting someone to do so, but imagine. Anyways, that's a good digression. I love that. I love to hear that you're enjoying an RPG game with a friend of yours. Make memories. Those are like cherished memories, in my opinion.